Hi everybody. So this is the math video that goes along with the sheet that looks like this. So this would be for Thursday. So today might be Thursday for you, or maybe you got to this earlier in the week, but make sure you're looking at the sheet that looks like this. So maybe you have two windows open on your device. If you can't, then just look at this video, and you don't really need to look at this because I'll kind of be mimicking it on the board. So I'm going to go through this worksheet just because I think that some explanation with this might be helpful. The day before, you worked on a sheet that talked about independent and dependent events. So just as a review, the difference between a dependent and an independent event means there's two events that happen, and if they're independent, that means the second event and the first event, they don't influence each other at all. So for example, if I have a deck of cards and I pull out a card and I get a queen of diamonds, and I'm going to flip another card, but first I'll put this back. Okay, so now we'll put it back in the middle. Now I'll pick another card, 8 of hearts. So those two events were independent because since I put the card back, this stayed the same, and my second event had no influence on the first one. If I took a card out and I have 8 of hearts, and now I put it down, and I pick another card, now it's dependent. Because my chance of getting an 8 of hearts is now lower, because I already picked it and I put it away. I didn't put it back. So now they're dependent. If I flip a coin and I get heads, and I flip it again and I get tails, those are independent. Just because I got heads on the first try doesn't mean that it's going to influence what my second flip is going to get. I could get heads and then heads again. I could get heads and then tails. It's a 50-50 chance. The second flip has no influence on the first flip. Okay, so on the sheet here, at the top it says we're going to be learning how to use tree diagrams. And we're going to be flipping a coin, just one coin. Just one coin. We're only flipping once, or flipping one coin, but we're going to flip it once and then flip it again. So on this chart here, I've copied it here. So this chart I would copy onto a lined piece of paper in your notebook or binder for math. On the first flip, I got heads, and the second flip, I got heads again. So that means the outcome would be HH. Okay. So if I flip again, my first flip is heads. What's the other possibility of the second flip? Tails. So then what do you think you would write in outcome? Heads, tails. Okay. Okay. On my first flip, what's the other possibility I could get? I could have gotten heads. I also could have gotten tails. So if I got tails, I could also flip tails on my second one, which means my outcome is tail, tail. Okay, my last outcome, I could get tails, and then I could also get heads. So my outcome is tails, heads. Okay. So those are all the outcomes. There's no other ones. There's no other combinations you could have gotten if I flip the coin twice. Okay? And then over here is where we're going to draw a tree diagram. Okay? So, and this is how you draw a tree diagram. Sometimes you can draw them from the top down. I'm going to draw them from the side out. I find that helps me feel more organized. So, on a tree diagram, so when I'm drawing, you're also copying into your book. For flip 1, okay, I could have gotten a heads or a tails, okay? Because we know that from our chart, heads or tails. Then we have flip 2, okay? If I got a heads, I could also get a head. If I got a heads, I could also get a tail. Okay? If I got a tail, I could also get heads. If I got tail, I could also get tail. Okay? Then along the side here is where we write our outcomes, basically what these outcomes were. So we've got heads, 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 tails, tail, heads, tails, tails. Okay, and I'll just draw a little square around it so I don't forget. So those are all the outcomes. So on the sheet here, number 1, where it says what's the probability of getting tails on both flips. So if we look at our chart here, H, 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 T, T, H, T, T. We want tail on both flips. There's only one time that occurs. So for number 1, there's one outcome out of how many? There's 4 outcomes. So the probability of getting tail, tail is 1/4. Okay, because there's only one time 1/4 occurs. Number 2, what's the probability of getting at least one tail? At least, so that can mean one tail or 2 tails. So let's look at all the times that tail occurs. Here's a tail, here's a tail, here's a tail. So that is 3. So the probability of getting at least one tail equals, and how many was that? It was 3. There's 3 times a tail comes up out of, how many outcomes are there? 4. Good. Okay. We're going to move to the back of this sheet. So I'm going to erase. Oh, I don't have an eraser. Oh, I'll just use tissue. So if you go to the back of your sheet, number 1 says you're trying to decide which pizza to order for dinner. Your choices are for crust, regular, thin, deep dish, and then you add one topping, which is pepperoni or sausage. So you're going to construct a tree diagram to figure out what are all the possibilities for what you could get as a crust and a topping. Okay, so we're going to make a tree diagram like we just did for the heads and tails coin flip. Okay, so here's our tree diagram. First, we want to know what the crusts are. Oops, that's the one that doesn't work. Okay, so the crust options are regular, thin, deep dish. So I'm going to call it reg, thin, deep dish. Okay, those are the crust options. And then we now need to pick a topping, which is either pepperoni or sausage. So I'm going to put up here topping. Okay, and we've got pepperoni or sausage. So if I get regular crust, I could get pepperoni. I'm just going to write pep and sausage. Okay, if I pick a thin, what are the 2 options of meat? Pepperoni, sausage. If I pick deep dish, what are the possibilities for toppings? Pepperoni, sausage. Okay, so we're not done yet. We've made the tree diagram, but then they want to know what are all the outcomes. So now that we've got the tree diagram, over here is where we write the outcomes. So if we get regular crust, we could have pepperoni topping. So regular crust, pepperoni topping, that's one option. Regular crust, sausage topping. Oops. Regular sausage. Okay, I could get thin crust and then pepperoni. I could get thin crust sausage. I could get deep dish pepperoni. Okay, and then I could get deep dish sausage. Just like last time, I'm just going to put a square around the outcomes. Okay. And then the last step, here it says, how many outcomes are there? So when we look at our outcomes list, how many are there? We just need to count up how many outcomes there are. 1 outcome, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there are six outcomes. So that's what you write in that little square. Okay? So now that you've watched this video, it's about 10 minutes long, I'm going to ask you to try and do 1 and 2. Remember, you're doing tree diagrams for all of them. Do tree diagrams similar to this. Okay? So you title the first one, title the second option. For the heads and tails, it was first flip, second flip. Okay? And then put a square around your outcomes. Okay? So then you know, now that I have this, I don't really need to look at my tree diagram anymore. Okay? I know that some people might say, I don't need to do tree diagram, I'm just going to do it in my head. Please, I know that some of these questions you might be able to do in your head, but please still do the tree diagram. The purpose of this is that eventually there are questions where the tree diagram gets so big and there are many, many options that you do need to use a tree diagram. Right now for crust and topping, yeah, maybe we could have done this in our head, but this is for practice for when we get to really big questions later in this unit and when you're in high school, that there are many different options and you really do need a tree diagram. You can't just keep it all in order in your head. Okay? All right, so that is the end of the math video and I hope that helped. Please message me if you need any help.